could be looking at an 8, and I account for the 9 and the 7, so the cards either side. So in this case, it's an 8. So they've returned the cards. I think it's an 8 of clubs or hearts, but I'm going to account for the cards either side, and this is how we now read the person. So in this example, they've cut to the 8 of hearts, and I'm just going to do a recap. We have turned away, they've cut the cards, they've shuffled, I've collected the cards back. At this point, all I know is that it could be an 8, a 9 or a 7, and it's definitely going to be a heart or a club. So now I'm going to talk to you about how we genuinely read the spectator to know what suit they're thinking of first, and then we're going to genuinely pick up on the value. And this is a mixture of throwing out language and observing our spectator. So we now know they're thinking of either a club or a heart, and we're going to use a technique by Michael Murray called a little something from his book Isolation. He gave me full permission to teach it here, so thank you, Michael Murray, for that. You're an absolute genius, and anyone not familiar with his work, I highly encourage you to check him out. Google him and look at his vast, extensive portfolio of amazing magic and mentalism. So, heart or a club, all we're going to do is we're going to name one of these two suits, but we're going to say it to the spectator whilst looking like we're committing to it, as though we can read their mind and we know what they're thinking. Okay, so you have to form a real belief within yourself that you can do this, or act as though you can. You have to be really convincing for this to feel good. But it's all down to the language. So this is what we're going to say in terms of the language. We're going to look at the spectator and we're simply going to say, I want you to think of the suit for me, and I'm going to say something to you. Okay, this is what we say. We say, I want you to think of the suit for me, and I'm going to say something to you. We then pause, and then we throw out one of those two suits. So I might say, hearts. And I'm going to say it, I point at them, and I usually nod, and I sometimes smile, as though I'm committing to it, saying, hearts, as though I feel they're thinking of a heart. Now, one of two things will happen. If they are thinking of a heart, they'll immediately smile and react, okay? They'll be like amazed that you somehow read that from their mind. If they're not thinking of a heart and they're thinking of a club, their immediate reaction will be that, oh, we're wrong, okay? So they'll react as though, they'll kind of usually wince the eyes slightly, and they start to, shake their head as though we're wrong. But we immediately continue with our talking by listing off all four of the suits, as though what we're intending to do is just list them off and look for reactions. So even if the spectator starts to shake their head as though they're not thinking of that suit, I know what suit they're thinking of now, and I continue to list them off. So Ida's behind the camera now. Ida, think of either a heart or a club. Okay. Okay, think of either of one, and just look at me for a second. Okay, just think of your suit, and I'm going to say something to you. Club. Heart, spade, diamond. Now, the moment I said club, Ida did not react at all. In fact, she kind of looked like I was wrong, because she was like this. The moment she says that, I know she's thinking of a heart. And I just log that information and I continue with the routine. If I throw out the heart first and she smiles, as though I'm right, I still continue to list off the suits, okay, because it still looks like we're feeling for information. The more we give away that we know information, the less impressive it is at the end. Because if I start to say, oh, you're thinking of a heart, okay, and I commit to it, I now am down to 13 options it could be, right? And that's a 1 in 13. Whereas if I continue to act as though I'm still not sure about any aspect of the card, up until the very point we reveal it, it's a 1 in 52. It remains a 1 in 52. And I want to keep that improbability alive. So I secretly log the information with Michael's technique. And now we're going to be looking at how we fish for the suit. So in my mind, I've already got that this could be an 8. And it also could be a 9 or a 10. So I asked them to visualize the card, imagine seeing the card here, turn up the turn up the color of the card and imagine the value for me. Now, because I know that they're thinking of either a 7, an 8 or a 9, I know that there's a lot of detail on the card. I know that the card would be considered as a high card potentially, by a layman. So I can already start to reveal information about the card. And to them, it will feel like you're really picking these things up. So let me just lay these out here. I now know it's a heart, but it could be one of these three cards, okay? So I'm now just going to describe the value, okay? So I'm going to say, I see a fair amount of detail on the card, and there's kind of symmetry. Now, if you look at all playing cards, there's some type of symmetry. If you divide the card, depending on which way you divide it, there's always going to be symmetry. So I'm actually throwing out statements that will always be considered true. And at this point, I'm just going to pretend that I'm seeing pips. I'm saying, okay, I see four pips here and here. There's symmetry on the card. Does that make sense? Now, if they're thinking of an 8, although the pips are spread in a different way, because we're saying there's 4 and 4, they'll immediately feel as though we're right if they're thinking of an 8, and they will react to that. So I then follow on with language like, I see 4 here and 4 here, so it could be an 8, or it's around about that kind of a thing. Now, we know in this example that they're thinking of an 8, so they will react at that. If they don't react at that, I say, it could be a 7, and I name one of the others, and I nod like this. It could be a 7, because at this point I want them to react and fold, you know, and say, oh yeah, it was the 7. So I'm just openly looking at them and fishing for the information. If I don't get any type of positive confirmation on throwing out these 2 suits, I will aim for this one, okay? And Vernon had a wonderful technique where he would fish between 2 values by simply taking one of the 2 values out. So if I'm internally down to a 7 or a 9, I might take the 7 out, and I say, you're not thinking of the 9 of hearts, are you? And they'll say no. And you say, really? What were you thinking? And then they confirm it's a 7. You can say, well, I'm glad I went for that then. Okay? So by having 2 options, taking one and miscalling the other, and if they confirm it's a 9, I just put this away and smile as though we've nailed it. So we never show the card, we just verbally nailed the card. And if not, I obviously act disappointed. I put distance between the cards and I say, well, what were you thinking? The 7. And then of course we have a moment where apparently we were just being cheeky with the revelation of the card they're thinking of. To practice estimation, the best way I find is to cut random amounts and really have a think about how many cards are there. There's the main portions that you can estimate, which are, is half of the deck. And there's also eyeballing a quarter of the deck. So these are my sort of pit stops. I've got 13, 26 are my pit stops, and then it's between these values that I start to learn the amount of cards that are cut. Best way to do it is to cut, have a go at estimating it, and then count the cards. So in this case, this feels like 9 cards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? Again, it doesn't matter if we're slightly off because we're going to be counting for the values either side. Same thing here. If I cut here, I would recognize immediately that it's close to half, but then I ask myself, is there more here or less here? I notice I've got less here. I know half is 26, so I might say here is probably 24. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, exactly 24 cards. And this is all the thought process that goes through my mind of how I deconstruct this. The moment I get the packet, I say, is it close to a quarter of the deck? Here it feels like it is. It feels like it's slightly less than a quarter, so I would aim for maybe 12 cards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. It's exactly a quarter of the deck. Again, we're in the right position to perform this effect. You'll see how by loosely estimating, dividing by 2, we can really narrow in on the value that they're thinking of. So look, that is every detail I can cover in this tutorial for Divide and Divine. Have fun with it, and thank you so much for your time.